All right, so let's move away from silly parliamentary semantics to abroad, where we have some interesting tales to tell. So the first is there was a debate in the United States. So the Democratic Party in the United States is looking at choosing its candidate for president to face Donald Trump in November this year. And a late entry to the race has been billionaire Michael Bloomberg. Now, he spent already more on his political campaign than basically any campaign before. I think despite the fact that he's hardly into the campaign, he spent more money than Barack Obama did in 2012. So he's really testing how far money can get you in American politics.
And so far.
He had a very tough debate. He's seemed to be rising in a lot of polls recently, so it looks like some of his strategy is paying off. But he was heavily attacked by many of the other candidates on stage in this debate the other night in Nevada. Firstly, Elizabeth Warren attacked him for non-disclosure agreements he signed with employees, particularly female employees, in relation to comments that he made to them.
Well, we can't really know.
Yeah.
But apparently the phrase horse-faced lesbian played into...
Warren brought that up.
Yeah, Warren brought it up. He also allegedly told a staffer when hearing that she was pregnant that she should stop messing about and just kill it because he doesn't have time for this. And he said, I believe someone was saying that there's about 40 employees who have tried to sue him at some point. So he's clearly not everyone's favorite boss. Herman, do you think he has a shot at the Democratic nomination? He's currently running behind Bernie Sanders, but some people think that he might have.
I think he does. I think he does. The reason being that it's not clear what the Clinton-esque establishment, which I think still controls a large part of the Democratic Party's mechanisms and functions in several states, it's not clear whether they would be willing to give Bernie Sanders a fair go. I'm not going to say that they're going to necessarily rig results, as the conspiracy theories coming out of Iowa were, but I definitely think that...
They might put their thumb on the scales a bit.
And exactly as they did last time to Bernie Sanders. And so I think it's a genuine shot, because at this point, 5 or 6 candidates for the Democratic nomination are, all of them rather underwhelming. There's no clear frontrunner. Usually at this point in the race, you have some direction of, where's it going? Who's the challenger? Who's the main challenger? Who's the insurgent?
The American conservative writer John Podhoretz has said that he thinks that this race is a lot like the Republican internal conflict in 2012, where Mitt Romney continued as a weak frontrunner, but still the frontrunner, and ultimately went on to win. He suspects that Bernie Sanders might win in a similar way. Gabriel, do you think Bloomberg has a shot at the nomination?
Yeah, I think it's less than half. But I think he does have a credible chance. One of the things to note is that everyone at the last debate turned on him aggressively, and
which is odd because he's not in first place.
No, and that's a
good for him.
So I think it is paradoxically, to some potential voters, that is going to be good for him. It gives him a lot of time. It means he's being talked about a lot, and it means he gets talked about a lot by incredible media pundits on America's mainstream left, who
incredible as in not credible.
Correct. So, and I think a lot of people's response is when they say this is bad, they're like, well, the media's tried to fool us so many times. If you're saying it's bad, then it must be good. And that's a lot of what helped Trump. Trump kept getting insulted by...
There's a very good example of exactly that happening now. So his social media has been very good.
He's really
it's literally the best money can buy.
Yeah.
And to try and find a good moment in his debate, his campaign team put out this very obviously humorous video where he asks, have any of you ever started a business?
Yeah.
And then it plays the sound of a chirping cricket while close-ups of the other candidates on the debate stage looking uncomfortable.
Yes.
But a huge wave of journalists have attacked it as being fake news and misinformation.
Yeah, which just reinforces ridiculous. The meme. Like, people aren't that stupid. I think one of the things that a lot of mainstream media, particularly in America, and us kind of, it's like they caught the cold and we really got the full-on flu, is they think that you can bully people into believing what you say regardless of what you're saying. And I think a lot of people hate watch CNN. A lot of people hate read the New York Times. They read it in precisely this way. They're like, I don't believe what you're saying. Also because I have the internet and I have TV, I can watch the debate myself. I can see whether you're telling the truth or not, and it's clear that you're not, and it's clear that often you haven't. So one thing that Bloomberg really
They
has...
seem to think that most of America are sort of confused grandmothers who are reading Facebook and
yeah,
believing
like
everything.
who really just get spoon-fed information.
Donald Trump really gave a Medal of Honor to a dog.
Yeah, exactly. That was a meme that was posted out, and then they were like, "Oh,
That's
news.
fake news. It's a doctor's
It's just a joke." Okay, so one thing that's in Bloomberg's favor is everyone bullying him could paradoxically boost him. Another thing in his favor is that he is a incredibly self-made billionaire who's added a hell of a lot of value, who's connected with Bloomberg News, which is generally, I mean, it's got some scripts, and people are trying to point out a sympathetic treatment of China, but overall, I think a very, very credible institution.
I was looking up what he actually became wealthy from last night, and it was his creation of what they call the Bloomberg terminal, which is a way of distributing financial information. It's like a program to do that.
And so the third thing that's really good for him is that my sense is that there is a shape to this Democratic primary, and that you have the sort of ultra-left socialists whose spending ideas are just about spending trillions and trillions to make all the problems go away of other people's money. So that's Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. The difference between them is Warren tries to play up social identity politics, whereas Sanders sticks to class much more consistently.
Yeah, there's very much a personality difference there.
Yeah, in the center, you've got Klobuchar, you've got Pete Buttigieg, and you've got Mike Bloomberg. And I think all of them are credibly more centrist. I think that there are significant differences between them. And then the personality qualities kind of shine out. Klobuchar is a bit more aggro as a politician. Mayor Pete's got this very low-level kind of
professional
homely
McKinsey, like the consultant. He feels like a consultant.
Well,
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, but he's also got this fabulous history where he's been a soldier and a Rhodes Scholar, and I think he's got the best history of really reaching across the aisle and reaching out to...
Interestingly, there was a very terse moment in the debate between him and Amy Klobuchar, where he answers a question in Spanish, and Amy Klobuchar, clearly losing her temper a little bit, says, "We can't be all as perfect as you, Pete."
Yeah. So he is really easy to hate in that kind of way. And then Mike Bloomberg is easy to hate in the more obvious way of being a bit of an, what's the polite word? Ordinary man.
That's a very diplomatic way of putting that.
And so I think that the biggest challenge is going to be going forward for the next couple of primary elections to see who's willing to step down in order for one of those two pockets to sort of consolidate the vote. Obviously, there's Joe Biden. I haven't mentioned him.
Yes.
Well, everyone else seems to be forgetting to mention him as well.
Yeah. So
on the debate stage, he would kind of occasionally go and say, "But I've done all this.
Yeah.
I'm the best.
I'm Barack Obama."
And then everyone would go back to ignoring him.
So the question is, so if Klobuchar were to step down and say, "Okay, Mayor Pete and I have our differences, but I really think you should go for him," and Joe Biden were to step down and say, "Mayor Pete and I have had our differences, but he's a younger man. I'm getting too old. Give your vote to him." Then I think Pete Buttigieg would be ahead of both Bloomberg and of Sanders. Potentially, you could start with eating away at that, and then Bloomberg would start seeming like a spoiler. Then he might have to drop out, and then Mayor Pete's got his chance. But that's only if Sanders and Warren continue to split the ultra left. And Warren doesn't look like she's going anywhere. Voluntarily, she is sinking in the polls, but between her and Sanders, there's this battle to try and consolidate that ultra-left vote. And from there, so everyone wants to control their own pocket and then take command of the party. And I think that it's going to be the side that coordinates that best that's going to win. And if they don't coordinate, then Sanders alone will most likely Mitt Romney his way through to this and end up dragging the Democrats into a situation where they are asking voters to choose between Trump and a communist.
So Herman, I just want to push back on that idea that you posed at the beginning, that the sort of Democratic establishment, as it's often sort of vaguely called, will step in to block Sanders from coming in and aid someone like Bloomberg. So I think there's a number of problems with that. One of them is that the Democratic establishment, as much as it exists anymore, has not agreed on who to back. It can't. It itself is divided between whether to back Buttigieg or Biden or Bloomberg. So that's the one problem. And the second problem is that so far there's been very little evidence that they're actually made serious moves. Senator Harry Reid, who's generally considered to be part of the establishment, has very close links with the culinary union in Nevada, who traditionally have extreme amounts of power in the Democratic caucuses there.
The key to the Democratic Party is through its stomach.
Yes. And he did not put pressure on them to endorse any one candidate. So even though they had some mild criticisms of Bernie Sanders, ultimately the culinary union did not endorse any candidate in Nevada, leaving the way open for Sanders to take it.
I think that's exactly why I say this is more of a in some states issue. This will be in states that have been Clinton-esque Democrats since the mid-90s, where the party establishment is of a specific orientation on a lower level than its people like Harry Reid, who represent on a more, national level. So I think that'll be in a few states, but I don't think it'll be as concerted, as establishmentarianist as in 2016, when I think there was an obvious attempt to
there was deliberate
punt Clinton
which forced the resignation of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the head of the Democratic National Committee.
Yes, but I must say that my question is, the Democratic Party must decide how it wants to win this election in November. Will they win it by putting up the anti-Trump? Will they win it by putting up their own Trump? Will they win it on social war, cultural war issues? Will they win it economically? They still have to decide what's the best point of attack for them as a party.
And in a lot of ways, Bloomberg and Sanders are the exact poles of those two things.
The two big options.
So Sanders' theory of the election is that you just motivate left-wing voters to come out in massive numbers. And
bring out the base. A lot of people who didn't vote before. And
they swamped the election.
And I must say, I think there is a good argument there. I was reading a piece in the New Yorker, sort of long-form human interest piece about organizers in Milwaukee. Milwaukee's in Wisconsin, really important battleground state, could very well tip the difference in the national election. And a lot of sort of working class and unemployed black people didn't show up to the last election to vote for Clinton, who did show up for Barack Obama. And efforts have been consistently made by a group called Black Leaders American Congress or something, to sort of literally every day, there's at least like a dozen people on the ground hitting the streets, knocking door to door to try and whip those voters. And I think that those voters, from the New Yorkers' way of presenting them and the kinds of conversations that were being had, would be more eager to stand up for a guy like Bernie Sanders than they would for a guy like Mayor Bloomberg. If they saw a guy like Mayor Bloomberg, a former Republican, Democrat, Republican, switcheroony guy who supported stop and frisk, the kinds of issues that are just sort of demonized and stigmatized, regardless of their real effects, it might dampen their enthusiasm.
There's actually quite a lot of...
Whereas Sanders could harness it.
Complexity there. So Mayor Bloomberg is often attacked as being toxic to black voters in the US because he's supported very aggressive measures against crime. And while there is definitely a very large section of the black community in America that's very wary of the police and hostile to them, there's also a section that... thinks that violent crime is the most important issue facing their lives.
Destroying their communities.
He's been outperforming Pete Buttigieg, for example.
We have this paradoxical thing where half of black America seems to be very, very against stop and frisk, and the other half is extremely pro. But of course, this is one of the problems with breaking people down into racial groups.
But exactly. I think the greatest advantage of incumbency is that your coalition going into the election is more established. Because essentially, with the Democratic Party having moved considerably more left than the Republican Party has moved in any direction, really, ideologically, I think to assemble a coalition to win in November is difficult to start with, but is complicated by the fact that I think the Trump coalition, Trump has been really clever in sustaining the unity of his coalition that unexpectedly propelled him to the White House. So the fact that Trump's coalition, his target voters, already very clear at this stage, stable, know he knows these people what they need, and the fact that the Democratic Party still needs to do coalition building to identify how they can kick Trump out of the White House,
and
I think
it really looks
counts
like
against
it's working. So a lot of analysts have predicted that the state to watch in this election is going to be Wisconsin, as he talks about there. And at the moment, the most recent poll of Wisconsin shows Trump up by 7 points.
I didn't see that.
Which is quite a lead. Anyway, we will have to see how that develops. American elections are always very exciting to watch.
Yeah.
So